Thank you everyone for gathering. We would like to begin subsession 3. The theme of subsession 3 is non-structural measures against earthquake. My name is Atsuko Ishii. I will be facilitating this session. In this session, presenters from 3 cities will make presentations consecutively. I would like to ask each of you to make your presentation time to within 10 minutes. After that, we will have a question and answer session at the end of the presentation. Now, I would like to start the first presentation. The presenter is Mexico City. Miss Diana Aracon Gonzalez. Please start.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation to be here with you to discuss some of our thinking about building resilience in a place like Mexico City. And we're talking about non-structural measures, so this is what I'm going to concentrate on. Mexico City is an earthquake-prone region. I don't have to tell you, you have probably heard about the major earthquakes that we have had in the past few years that have represented a large loss of lives and economic losses. Besides earthquakes, we have major disasters in the city as well, major floods, water distress, wildfires. You have probably heard last week we had an emergency situation with the quality of air in the city, and that's mainly because of fires. You know, the fires in the rest of the country that blow all the smoke to the city. The city's a valley, so the smoke stays and it generates these very dangerous particles, high concentration of 2.5 particles, which are some of the most dangerous. And that is combined with obviously high pollution from cars, from transportation in the city. We have a government program which is based on 5 principles, and you can see the principles here, all the good things that a government wants to do to have to build a sustainable city with innovation, equality, transparency, and so on. But we are coming in terms of building resistance and reducing risk. We are coming, or we are building projects, government programs around this concept, the concept of risk. And risk is determined by 3 things. One is by the presence of hazards, obviously, natural hazards, earthquakes, floods, etc. But second, by the vulnerability of people and assets to those hazards. And 3, by the level of exposure of those people. And as it becomes obvious to any of us who have experience of, who have witnessed this, especially in developing countries, both vulnerability and exposure are determined by socioeconomic factors. And it is mainly large inequality in our city that leaves poor people more exposed to or at higher risk. Right? You have a city with high inequality, and therefore there are people who have greater exposure and are more vulnerable. When you have a natural hazard, they suffer a disproportionate loss of assets, income, lives, which feeds into inequality. So here we have a very vicious circle or cycle between natural disasters and inequality. So among the most disadvantaged groups, you have almost all the time a disproportionate loss of assets and income that results in greater inequality. But not only is the exposure to hazards, it is also the capacity to recover from those, right? If you have 2 groups of people, the wealthy and the poor, when there is a climate hazard or a natural hazard, the poor will have less capacity to recover from it. And sometimes, in fact, it goes into, or it feeds into these poverty traps. So what we need, and based on this concept, we are building a new policy framework, one where structural inequalities push people toward greater exposure and sustainability, so therefore the need to address the root causes of inequality. And these policies for resilience building, we think have to be part of a transformative agenda for long-term adaptation and development. So there is no such a thing as development policies and building resilience. We think that they have to go together. Resilience in the sense not only of building the ability of people to come back to where we were, this is not enough, but the concept of social resilience, which is building capacity among people and communities to protect against risk and to recover and leap forward when there is a disaster. So in that sense, as I said, building resilience is part of development policies, both in terms of its economic and social dimensions. This is a comprehensive policy framework that is addressing inequality in my country. These are the 6 pillars of the government plan for the next 6 years. I don't have much time to go over them, but what I can say is that in all these different pillars of our priorities, the concept of resilience is part of it. We have an important increase in investment to reduce inequality. I'm sorry, it says 60% increase, it should be 32%. This year, we increased expenditures on infrastructure by 32%. And it's mainly transportation, reconstruction of housing, to address the losses from the earthquake in 2007. You won't believe it, but when we came to government in December 2017, still a lot of the houses that were damaged by the earthquake in 2017 had not been rebuilt. All of the policies and all of the investment that we are doing is actually targeted to the poorest and most vulnerable areas in the city. These are the dollar figures of the investments that we are doing and the location of them. Not very important for this presentation, but I want to go over some of the signature investments to address inequality in the city that we think is at the core of risk and vulnerability of people. We are building community centers. For next year, we have the target of 300 community centers to improve the social cohesion and increase opportunities of people with a whole lot of services provided to people. We are building an integrated transportation system to connect the periphery, which is the poor areas, to the center. We are offering culture and tourism for the most disadvantaged, systems for rainwater collection. Remember, Mexico City is a water-stressed area, and there are houses, there are families that do not have regular supply of water. So we are building these rain harvesting systems for water collection, for regular supply of water. There is a comprehensive program to support schooling at all levels. We already have a system of universal pension for seniors. We are recovering our parks and recreation centers, supporting cooperatives and self-employment for people, and several policies for employment creation. The lemma, you say lemma of the city, the phrase of the city is innovation and rights of this government. And we are saying with innovative solutions, we are building a city where all citizens have a right to a decent living, including resilience against natural disasters. So, you know, the Constitution of Mexico City recognizes the rights of people to all the different dimensions of development, and including the right to a resilient city. So these are some of the issues. I didn't bring some of the specific projects in relation to earthquakes, but the main idea is if risk is determined by vulnerability and there is an uneven capacity of people to respond to that, what we are addressing are the root causes of such vulnerability by building stronger housing and increased capacity of people to respond and to move around. Sometimes people are pushed to risky areas, risky housing, and risky areas of the city out of poverty because there is no alternative than to live on the slopes or on the areas that are most at risk. So that's what we are trying to address, a policy that will build the many different aspects of resilience to the risk that is natural to the city, to the geography of the city. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gonzalez. Please give her applause. So, now we would like to move on to question and answer.
Oh,
please, please raise your hands if you have any questions or comments. Our staff will bring you a microphone.
Thank you for that. That was really interesting. In 2016, Mexico City released its resilience strategy.
Yes.
And your policy framework has got six pillars around sustainability, security, transportation, cultural capital, and others. Are those the pillars in the resilience strategy, or is that separate?
No, these are the pillars of the government program for these 6 years. We are a new government. We just came in December of 2018. Yeah. And this is the overall development program for the city for 6 years. The resilience strategy is built into it. All different aspects of the resilience strategy of the country have been incorporated into all the different areas. So when you're talking about rights to housing and reconstruction and so on, there is these elements of the resilience strategy that are part of it. When it comes to education, the issue about raising awareness and social and civil protection, the protocols for civil protection and how to move around and so on are built into the policies of education and so on.
I remember a small community, it's Tapalapa, did I say that right, in Mexico City? There's a small community called, it's Tapalapa?
Iztapalapa.
Iztapalapa, yeah.
It's a large community.
It's a large community, right, and it's incredibly vulnerable.
Yes, it's one of the poorest of Mexico City.
Yeah, and it sounds like you're really looking to address the inequity but it's also endemic problems around providing infrastructure to communities like that. So how are we addressing that with this framework?
Well, everything that is being done, all the investments in infrastructure are being targeted precisely to those regions. Iztapalapa, Xochimilco, Tlalpan, Milpalta are some of the poorest regions of Mexico City. We have 16 mayors in the city that govern these regional areas. I don't know how to call them, I don't know, whatever they are called, delegaciones we call them, demarcations. So the infrastructure is being built precisely in those regions. Iztapalapa, just to make a case, is a case in point. Most of the houses, or a very large proportion of the houses that were damaged by the earthquake in 2017 were in Iztapalapa. So what we are doing now is a large program of reconstruction precisely of those houses. The issue of water, the earthquake exposed large cracks in the streets and the houses. Actually, you go to some of the houses in Iztapalapa and the room is cut in half. One part of the room is this high and the other one is very low. And that there is a big explanation for that. We are depleting our water table, and that generates all these big gaps underneath. So we are addressing the issue of infrastructure, for example, by leveling those streets and recovering the areas that were damaged. The issue of water, Iztapalapa is precisely one of the regions that has largest scarcity of water in the city. So we are planting now, we are doing installation of rain harvesting systems precisely in Iztapalapa that will provide people 5 to 8 months of safe water a year. So all of the infrastructure, the figures that I showed in that table, all of the infrastructure construction is precisely targeted to those areas. Also in terms of transportation, we are going to build 4 cable cars in the city, 4 lines of cable cars. The first is already under construction. And those cable cars are connecting precisely those highlands of the city. Remember, Mexico City is a valley. Poor people are living kind of in the hills around the valley, and transportation, you can imagine, is very poor in those areas. So those cable cars are connecting those high parts of the city to the rest, to the network of the transportation system, so that you address an issue of mobility of people. So, yeah. That's resilience building, we think.
Thank you very much.
I have a question, ma'am. I agree with you wholeheartedly. Socioeconomic is, in disaster response and recovery, very important. I know after Katrina in New Orleans, 2005, we still have homes that haven't been rebuilt.
Right.
And it's basically because, and that's another question, I don't know if you have private insurance there or not, but it was the either low income that couldn't afford insured, or the retirement of people who had bought and owned their homes, paid them off, but they still, in their retirement benefits, they couldn't afford insurance.
Right.
So there's a big problem when you talk about response and recovery. Could you answer about private insurance and that?
Yeah. In a country like Mexico in general, private insurance is probably serving the top 1% of the population. It's a matter of cost, right? It's very expensive. We have tried to come up with different schemes, with different this pooling of risk pooling schemes and so on, to provide wider access to insurance, but it hasn't been. We haven't found the answer. In Mexico City, most houses, most families will not have insurance. So when you have a problem like this, it is the middle class and especially the poorest, the ones that are going to suffer the loss. I don't know if there is a good way to reorganize that market, but it's certainly a missing market.
I just want to jump in. I wonder, having asked a number of people in Mexico City that question about insurance, the reply that I seemed to get, and I don't want to put you on the spot, was the underlying reason was a lack of trust in the insurance industry to actually help them. So from your perspective, is it a lack of trust or a lack of finance or lack of affordability or both? What would it be if it was more one than the other?
I think that it is all of the above. The financial sector in Mexico is one of the most questioned in terms of their operations. It's a very expensive system of intermediation, but it's also full of traps. I am a person who can afford, for example, a private health insurance, and I try to avoid, going or claiming my medical expenses to my health insurance. One, because the upfront cost of accessing that is so high that sometimes, it's just cheaper to go and pay the doctor and your medicine. And second, because when you have really a catastrophic event and you need to cash in or to recover your loss, most of the time, there is this very lengthy process and all kinds of discounts that will make it really irrelevant. So there is a problem. Plus, we have several instances of the financial sector avoiding the responsibilities, if you know what I mean. It is true. I mean, it's an issue. It's not only an issue of regulation, but it's the operation itself of the financial system, including the insurance system, that I'm sure needs to be looked at with fresh eyes. And actually, now that I'm talking about this, one of the first things I'm going to tell my mayor when I come back is we have to look into this seriously.
Come down to New Zealand and have a look.
Good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gonzalez. Thank you very much. So we would like to go on the next presenter, Santiago. Miss Ana Luisa Yenes, please start.
Okay. Good afternoon. Chile is one of the countries that have the most natural risks: hydrometeorological, volcanic, seismic. The images and memories of the massive earthquake of February the 27, 2010, in our country Chile, were human losses and damage to property and the environment, made us re-examine where we live, that risks we are exposed to, and to identify that our priority is to prepare for existing risks before, during, and after. Risks of tsunami at sea. Oops. Retroceder. Acá. This preparedness must be in our home, in our neighborhood, in our school, and at work, facing the different type of risks that we are exposed to in our country, not only where we live, but also where we go on vacation. Map of Chile. Chile is the country very large. The more important earthquakes in 1970 Richter scale 9.7, 106,000 deaths. Earthquake in 2010 Richter scale 8.8, 521 deaths. Urban risk. Santiago, capital, political, and business center with a great infrastructure. Museum, churches, hospital, school, public and private building is not immune to natural or anthropic risks. The capital of Chile, Santiago, is a local government. It must respond to emergencies according to the level of impact and its responsive capacity. Earthquake. For example, partial collapse of brick wall in building, the earthquake of February 27, 2010. Earthquake. In the 2010 earthquake, there were 5,000 damaged houses in the capital Chile of Santiago. How to forget the damage that is caused in our neighborhood? Fear in children, earthquake, risk of collapse in church after an earthquake, fall of elements from churches with serious risk to people crossing the street. Risk present in the city. It's possible, look the imagine. Earthquake, the damage in the cause in the heritage neighborhood. For example, Yungay neighborhood. Earthquake, the damage is caused in our school. Of the 600 buildings in the capital, only 8 were damaged, representing 1.3% of the total. For example, the building, the damage in the building. The other cause, all is in the Air Square, the February 27, 2010 in Santiago. It's possible to see the structural collapses in building after a square, collapses in prefabricated stair. Flooding. This should not have happened as the river had a sufficient capacity to contain the existing rain. Flooding in the capital de Chile in April 2016. Flooding in the center Santiago, Chile. Flooding in the center. Flooding. It is fundamental to realize that serious risk exists and that both we and our loved ones are exposed, and that they should evaluate our vulnerabilities and prepare ourselves differently for each threat. And we cannot expect others to do a job that is ours, because being prepared is everyone's task. However, from a municipal perspective, our work focuses on conducting risk management at the local level. 1. Strengthening the communal civil protection system. 2. Managing information about risk disaster. 3. Learning more about the strategies used in the work for risk disaster reduction. 4. Transferring on the community experience in the field in risk disaster reduction. 5. Establishing strategic alliances with both public and private institutions that are related to risk management. 6. Improving existing infrastructure and projecting with an integrated vision. 7. Improving coordination with companies in basic service. 8. Permanently updating municipal emergency plan by type of risk, for example, the shelter plan and liaison plan. 9. Training the school community, neighborhood meeting, mother center, and building administration, among others. All this to advance the National Disaster Risk Reduction Policy, presented by the National Emergency Office, relates to strengthening institutionalism, strengthening of monitoring and early warning system, promoting the culture of prevention and self-care, reducing the underlying risk factor, strengthening emergency response capacity. The mayor, Felipe Alessandri Vergara, signed in October 2017 the commitment to collaborate as member of the civil protection system in the formal process that Chile assumed by joining the same day from work, with the aim of contributing to the integral management of the risk of disaster, strengthen preparedness, response and recovery capacities, contribute on the construction of a culture of prevention and self-assurance, resulting in more resilient communities and institutions. For example, strengthening emergency response capacity, strengthening of monitoring and early warning system, the mayor promoting prevention activities, simulation in school, training in the school community, promoting the culture of prevention and self-care, promoting the culture of prevention and self-care, promoting the culture of self-care. Prepared family plan. We use successful experience from other countries. Japan experience, how to survive for 72 hours is important. The question is all. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ms. Yenes. So let's move on to the question and answer session. So please raise your hand if you have any questions or comments on the presentations. It's okay. Is there any question and comment? Okay.
I have a question. I will say it in Spanish first.
Okay, thank you.
And then in English. Veo en los datos que tienes que el número de muertes es muy bajo. ¿Esto es porque ocurren en zonas que son más despobladas o porque hay códigos de construcción muy estrictos para evitar pérdidas de vida? And so the translation is in the figures that she showed, the number of casualties, deaths is relatively low. I mean, for the magnitude of the earthquakes that you have. So the question is, whether that has an explanation on the fact that earthquakes hit on isolated areas, or there is actually, a very good enforcement of construction codes and a good protection.
Sí. Chile se caracteriza por tener excelente construcción. Entonces los códigos de construcción sí, son,
Chile, and the codes are very, very good.
Son muy estrictos y hay las personas están acostumbradas, tienen una cultura que en Chile cada día hay un temblor en cualquier región de Chile.
So the codes are very strict, and people are also very ready to face earthquakes. There is one earthquake a day in different regions of the country.
Es muy importante tener una cultura de prevención, traspasar en el fondo a nuestras familias, a nuestros hijos, a nuestros nietos, porque entendemos que por lo menos en nuestra vida o la de nuestros nietos, por lo menos va a haber un terremoto.
So she says it's very important to build that culture of preparedness and to make sure that the new generations will grow with that culture of prevention, because we know that over your lifespan, you are going to be hit by a major earthquake.
Sí, y por ejemplo, en el terremoto de 2010, la mayor cantidad de gente que murió fue gente que que estaba, por ejemplo, de vacaciones y estaba en la costa, entonces no sabían cuáles eran las zonas de evacuación y no estaban preparados para responder frente a una emergencia. Generalmente turistas, incluso había en una isla un festival donde solamente había un bote para cruzar. Al producirse el terremoto y posterior tsunami, la gente no tenía cómo regresar al continente.
So she says, for example, in 2010, when the major earthquake hit, the people who died, who were damaged, are mainly tourists who were visiting coastal areas, so that they didn't know what the evacuation routes were or how to respond to that. There was actually one island where there was a music festival, and there was only one boat to come back to the city. So people were trapped there when the tsunami hit. They were not able to leave, but to the point that people are prepared to face those disasters, and it is mainly people visiting or not knowing the codes that will be hit.
Sí. Lo otro importante es que hay muchas personas capacitadas que son voluntarios para ayudar y responder. Incluso si hay, por ejemplo, en 2010, el terremoto lo más fuerte fue en el sur de Chile. Las otras regiones fueron a cooperar voluntariamente al sur de Chile.
She says there is a culture of cooperation and help when something like that hits, and there are people who voluntarily will move around to help people. In 2010, most damage from the earthquake was in the south of Chile, and many people from the rest of the country went to work with communities.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. One more questions?
It's just short. It's a statement. And that's a good point, really. I agree wholeheartedly because like a city in New Orleans or New Zealand or anywhere, we have maybe 1 million plus visitors a year. And I mean, how do you contact that community when they come to visit your city? I mean, no matter where, Mexico City or wherever it is in the world. So do you contact them at the airport when they get there? How do they know how to evacuate or how to prepare for major disasters? And if you think about history, like they say, most of the people who lose their lives are those tourists that are visiting at that time. So.
Thank you. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. So let's move on to the next presentation. Next presenter is General Disaster Prevention Department, Tokyo Metropolitan Government. Mr. Arigane, please come to the stage.
皆さんこんにちは。私
Good afternoon. Please allow me to speak in Japanese, and please get your earphone and ready to listen to me through the translation. Japan, too, is a very earthquake-prone country. Last June, there was a massive earthquake in Osaka, and in September, another one in Hokkaido. And in the imperial era of Heisei, there was a major earthquake in Kumamoto in 2016, and Great East Japan earthquake in 2011. Tokyo, about 100 years ago, experienced a massive earthquake in 1923, a Great Kanto earthquake, with devastating consequences. So Tokyo has a lot of earthquake hazards. So how shall we cope with that? So we are approaching it based upon the three concepts: self-help, I protect my own life, and mutual help, we protect our own city, and public assistance, public authorities protecting us through large-scale initiatives and measures. So these three roles have to cooperate and coordinate with each other. We are assuming the damage by the earthquake directly striking Tokyo. There's a chance of 70% of magnitude 7 class earthquake hitting Tokyo directly in the next 30 years. Tokyo is the political and economic core of Japan, with heavy accumulations of the transportation and infrastructure. So in the wake of a major earthquake, there will be very devastating consequences. During the daytime, Tokyo hosts a lot of visitors and commuters and tourists from within and outside of the country. So with all of those people, we have to proceed with disaster preparedness initiative. The chart here, you see here, is a damage estimation of earthquake directly striking Tokyo. Based upon objective data, the chart or the table was prepared. Approximately 9,700 deaths and 147,000 injuries, and about 304,000 units of buildings totally destroyed. The peak time evacuees will number about 3.39 million, and there will be about 5.17 million people who cannot return home in the wake of a big earthquake. Tokyo is the capital of Japan with very heavy accumulations of population and urban functions. Therefore, the damage estimated is very severe. TMG revised the regional disaster management plan in 2016 by reducing the number of fatalities by about 6,000 and reducing the burned buildings and total destroyed buildings by a total of about 200,000 units. And we are playing active roles for educating and influencing people to enhance their disaster preparedness. In 2015, we prepared this booklet, Tokyo Bosai, Let's Get Prepared, or a disaster management booklet. It gives various preparedness advice and preparedness measures in advance of earthquake or disaster potential. And we have disseminated this booklet to 7 million households in Tokyo and have uploaded this on the TMG homepage. I have published this in Korean, Chinese, and English, as well as in the audio version, Braille, and in large fonts and in multiple languages, including those I have mentioned. And people should develop their preparedness actions through their daily life, where women's perspective is very important. This is Disaster Readiness Guide, which we published in March in 2018, reflecting women's perspective and including very detailed and very careful and attentive measures and advice reflecting women's viewpoints. And this is a free of charge booklet distributed to up to 10,000 locations in Tokyo. The total circulation is 1.95 million. And what are the disaster preparedness items they should carry when they go out, and what they can do to fix their furniture at home, and what are the daily life disaster preparedness actions that people can easily take with illustrations and characters so that the people can have a sense of attachment to this booklet. And lifeline disruption in the wake of earthquake directly hitting Tokyo, we have come up with the measures to cope with it. And in case their home is has escaped the damage, they should stay home as much as possible. Unless absolutely required, they should refrain from going out or moving. And at least for 3 days, they should be prepared with the daily necessity stockpile. And babies' liquid milk formula, this standard was established within the Japan for the domestic standard for the liquid formula, milk formula for babies, and the sales started just last March. And so we are promoting the proper stockpiling of these daily necessities. In the wake of a disaster, people who happen to be close proximity should be able to cooperate and help themselves. But in Tokyo, the bondage of the people, including the younger generation, is getting weaker and weaker. And therefore, we are supporting the disaster preparedness leaders among citizens and the community's activities for disaster preparedness. And 4 times a year, we do our seminars and other activities to promote the development of community and citizen organizations leaders, and we send our speakers or teachers to the seminars. And to promote the role of women leaders in disaster management and to support gender equal society, that is a very important target. And in disaster preparedness in general, there has been the issue that the women's views have not well reflected, or women are not well represented, and therefore we are doing more and more to reflect women's roles, women's viewpoints, and to have a greater participation of women in seminars which organize 4 times a year and other community activities for disaster preparedness. And we do 2 seminars for the development of women leaders in disaster preparedness and others in communities. And our aim target is to develop 3,000 such women leaders by 2020. We have a highly developed railroad network in Japan, especially Tokyo, with the very busy stations, including Shinjuku. And a few million people commute to and come to Tokyo per day, including tourists. So in the wake of a disaster or earthquake, people get stranded. People will have no place to go as the transport get disrupted. So in case of a disaster, we tell people they should not try to move around or try to travel unless absolutely required, because once all people begin to take a move, people may get involved in the people's avalanche, or those people's moving may prevent the smooth rescue and relief activities from going on. And therefore, we have designated and set up a temporary shelter for those people who cannot return home, where the convenience stores give support for the preparation of such sites. And TMG is publishing in multiple languages disaster-related information. The Tokyo Daily Life Bosai, or disaster preparedness, is published, is uploaded in multiple languages, and it was renewed in March this year. And it has the automatic translation function as well. And it has 8 foreign languages and 9 transcriptions. And toward Tokyo 2020, the Olympics, Paralympics, with increasing number of foreign tourists, we are disseminating the disaster information, including digital signage. And we are publishing digital signages in 3 languages and in 3 foreign languages in Japanese, where you can see where to go to evacuate, and the evacuation sites and evacuation routes are published. And we are introducing and unfolding new measures, including youngsters, and that is the release and utilization of Tokyo Metropolis disaster readiness application. And it's easy to use to get information on disaster prevention or preparedness. It has quiz and games and disaster preparedness tips. And the disaster information is disseminated if you just push this application. And this is made available in English, Chinese, and Korean. This disaster readiness in daily life application. So to prevent the spread of disaster damage, we have to carry out the preparedness on a daily basis, which we do with collaboration with the municipalities and related organizations such as the Tokyo Metropolitan Police, Tokyo Fire Defense Agency, and Self-Defense Forces, Japan Coast Guard, for the execution of public help drills and training, and the participation of citizens in initial fire fire extinguishing, firefighting, and first aid, rescue and relief, and hands-on drill for self-help and public help, mutual help. Also, we carry out anti-terrorist drills with the participation of private sector entities. We'd like to increasingly strengthen the resilience of Tokyo against disasters. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Arigane. So let's move on to the Q&A session. So is there any question or comments?
Thank you, sir. A two-part question. Number one, on your for your preparedness. It's okay.
Okay.
For the two-part question, for your preparedness, do you have a stockpile of emergency supplies with distribution centers? Second question is your designated safe haven facilities or shelters. Are they permanent, or do you move them around depending on the threat?
First, emergency goods and relief goods. In Tokyo, whenever a disaster occurs, there are schools, elementary and secondary schools. People should go to the gymnasium of those schools, primary or elementary or secondary. And 3 days water, drinking water or blankets, 3-day food and emergency food are stockpiled in those school gymnasium in the communities. And from those places to the evacuation centers, they are transported using vehicles, the trucks, and so forth. So we have such a cycle. We have such a structure. A shelter, we don't have this so-called shelter, but we do use a gymnasium indoor. People can live, take shelter in the gymnasium of a school. So until the disaster is managed, people will stay there in the gymnasium.
Thank you very much. Is there another question?
When we come to the Olympics, where do we get training? Again? So I said, when we come to the Olympics, where do we get training?
まずはですね、オリンピックの時、
First of all, in Tokyo 2020, I keep my fingers crossed that there shall not be a disaster or anything. But if something happens, a disaster happens in a Olympic venue, a Paralympic venue, it's a robust and it's a very resilient, a strong structure. You can take a temporary shelter in the Olympic or Paralympic structure, the building. And in the venue, the athletic venue, there'll be a place secured, being prepared so that the people can go to or can evacuate to be safe until things get managed. But if something happens too severe that it disrupts the proceeding of an event, then you should go home. You should return home. But we should hope that that should not happen, and we will do everything we can to do every good piece of preparation. So come to Tokyo next year.
Thank you very much. The staff will bring you the microphone.
Thank you for your presentation. It seems like a very common theme with all these disasters is that we're finding, obviously afterwards, things we can improve upon, but also that we've made pretty massive assumptions. So maybe in the case of New Orleans, it was the levees. Christchurch may have been just the building codes. Obviously, with the last disaster in 2011, it was how we prepare for or assess for disasters where we build our nuclear reactors. When you look at the recent history of disasters, be it Kobe in 1995 or 2011, what has Tokyo done looking at those, and how have you revisited the assumptions that you made up to now, and then what were those assumptions, and what have you done to fix them? Did that make sense?
1ページ目出してもらえる
1923, a great country earthquake that occurred 100 years ago when the society and the country society of Tokyo and the country of Japan were very different. We had a lot of wooden houses in Tokyo. Roads were very small, narrow, and once an earthquake occurred, and then the fire spread out all around, and everything was burned down in the center of Tokyo because of this earthquake 100 years ago. We have to get rid of that, and you can see our town, we can see our city. It's made of concrete, very strong material. We have a bigger roads, wider roads, so that we have a broad belts to prevent the spreading of fires. And we have robust structures of buildings so that they won't collapse according to the standards of Japan's building codes. Even if a great earthquake occurs, buildings should not collapse. There shall not be a starting of a fire. That's what we have done and trying to strengthen furthermore. And if something happens, then we, the public authorities, should rush out to give help, can mobilize ourselves immediately, so we are getting prepared for that.
From Christchurch. How much work have you done with the business community, particularly around preparedness? I mean, our own experience in Christchurch was that a lot of businesses did have business continuity insurance and business continuity plans, but they weren't really aware of what the impacts of a disaster were going to be on the operation of their business. So I'm just wondering how the Tokyo Metropolitan Government is working with the business community, because that's a big part of the community.
10ページ出してもらえますか。企業もですね、防災の担い
Businesses do play a role in disaster preparedness, so we work together with businesses because they play part, and we expect them to play part in preparedness. So the company employees, if they all try to go home immediately when something happens, and that will create a massive confusion, paralysis. So company employees should at least stay within the company premises for at least 3 days. And the company do have stockpile of the daily necessities and the food, and they should share those relief goods and the food with the community, with the people. And we have a new measure, the convenience store. We do have convenience stores. When people go home and on their way home, they can drop in the convenience store to get drinking water or use the toilet in the convenience store. So we have enlisted the support of these convenience stores. So these businesses are taking part in our actions.
Much. And please.
Yeah, I was looking at your figures of, the death tolls of some of your earthquakes, which are very large. I mean, if you compare the intensity to the death toll and compare to Chile, the figures that we saw in Chile, it's pretty amazing. So is that construction related? Is that the tsunami follow-up? What explains that high incidence?
基本的にはですね、
It's because of fire incidents. fires occurring. So many people lost their lives from fires. So we have got to minimize the occurrences of fires resulting from these earthquakes or disasters. That's what Korea currently do. Maybe I think she's talking about 2011 Great East Japan disaster, approximately 20,000. And what's the particular cause of the 2011 disaster? Oh, is she talking about the Great East Japan 2011 disaster? About 2011 disaster, the death toll is so great. That's because tsunami.
The difference between the death
Entre Chile,
between
que
Chile
tiene
that has
earthquake
earthquakes.
de more level, 9.5 en 1960 o
9.5 in
8.8 en 2010
2060
y hay
or
menos muertos.
9.8 in 2010 and there is less incidents, less people dying.
No es solamente por la calidad de la construcción.
It's not only the quality of construction.
Hay varios factores, yo creo, con la diferencia con Tokio. Primero, la cantidad de personas.
There are many factors, including
Sí.
the number of people in
Sí.
Japan.
En Chile viven 17 millones de personas solamente.
In Chile, we have 17 million people.
Y el terreno, el suelo de Chile es mucho más fuerte
And the ground is more solid
que Tokio.
than Tokyo.
Yo creo esas son las
So that makes the
diferencias.
difference between the
Sí.
death toll in between Japan and Chile.
そうですね。この表の中でですね、非常にこの表の中で非常に
Sorry, about this table, 2011 Great East Japan earthquake. That was a very massive earthquake, plus a tsunami. Tsunami hit the country, hit the region. People were engulfed in the massive waves. But in all the other earthquakes, they were not followed by a tsunami. But there was a landslide, and people buried up in the earth resulting from the landslide.
Is there another questions or some comments? Could you have the explanation, maybe? The lady? Is it okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
So this is the end of the presentation. So now we'd like to ask Ms. Yenes to wrap up the session. Can I have some comment? Please have a mic.
Sí, claro.
Me piden una pequeña reflexión. Yo creo que por lo menos lo que he visto hoy día,
I want to share a thought from what I have seen today.
lo más importante entre Tokio, México, Chile es preocuparse de la prevención, prepararse antes.
The
No
most
sola-
important thing and something that is common to Chile, Tokyo, and Mexico is prevention and to be prepared beforehand.
Sí, la respuesta viene después y todas ayudan, pero lo más importante es la preparación. Ahora,
The response will come after, but the most important thing is preparation.
sí, nosotros hemos aprendido mucho también de Tokio, Japón, es que no solamente los militares, los bomberos tienen que prepararse, sino que cada persona.
We have learned a lot from Japan in the sense that it's not only the firefighters or the military that need to be prepared, but each one of us has to be ready.
Entonces estamos, al igual que Tokio, estamos aumentando la capacitación en los vecindarios, los adultos mayores, en los niños, en los colegios, en todos, porque la respuesta en 72 horas en Chile es imposible, por ejemplo.
We have learned from Japan that we have to prepare everyone, the older people, the children, the families, the communities, everybody, because the response 72 hours after it hits is the most important thing.
Entonces, por eso creemos que es muy importante los planes de familia preparada para que ellos entreguen la primera respuesta en las 24 horas, porque no van a llegar los bomberos ni la ayuda de otros países para ayudar a la familia en las primeras 24 72 horas. Entonces, tiene que ser cada uno que tenga su plan de respuesta.
One of the most important things is the family planning in order to respond on the next 24, 48, 72 hours after it hits, because foreign assistance or even the military or the firefighters will be overwhelmed and not necessarily enough to respond to those situations. So it is within the family that has to be ready.
Sobre todo los que trabajamos en preparación y respuesta, somos los que más tenemos que tener planes en la familia, porque tenemos que salir inmediatamente a trabajar y también estamos afectados.
Especially those of us who work on rescue and assistance. To these cases, we have to be prepared, our families have to be prepared, because we are the ones who will have to be out there dealing with the emergency, but we also have families and we have to be ready for that.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, so I appreciate the meaningful discussion today. Then this is the end of the subsession 3.